Episode number 51 of the Campfire Series podcast. I am your host, Logan Soforenko. Another very exciting interview today with Mary Kate Moore of Les Miserables. Here we go.
Well, hello. My name is Mary Kate Moore. Most recently in the national touring cast of Les Miserables, playing the role of Fantine. And before that, I was on the national tour of Fiasco Theater Productions Into the Woods, doing a standby for that show. And then before that, I was cruising around the ocean on Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines doing Cats, the musical, which was fun at sea. And yeah, then before that, I was a musical theater major at Oklahoma City University, and I'm from Nebraska, born and raised Nebraskan girl.
We're getting a lot of Midwest vibes. I like it. So with that being, how long did you spend time with the national tour of Les Mis?
From 2017, from the end of the summer in 2017 through COVID shutdown this year. So yeah, it was just getting close to the 3-year mark for a lot of us. Yeah, quite a while.
So tell me a little bit about that. I know that doing a show for a long period of time in the same place on Broadway is it's easier. You're in the same place, 8 times a week. Uh, but when you're traveling across the country, tell me a little bit about what it was like just being in it for such a long period of time, and quite frankly, making it new every night.
Oh, well, that's, I think, the greatest challenge really to theater actors that are with a show for a long period of time. Because we did, I think when we closed our tour back in March, we had upwards of 900 performances of the show that we had done, which is kind of crazy to think about. I think my goal was always finding consistency. It was a lot of like trusting that I was in the role for a reason, that I had gotten cast because I had a unique and powerful perspective on the character. And so what I needed to do was just make sure that I was living up to the reputation of the role the way that I do it each night. So a lot of the time that just came down to making sure that I got to the theater at the same time every day, and I made sure that I was getting my pre-show ritual in and allowing myself grace for the shows that didn't feel as good, but then also really enjoying the ones where things felt fresh and new, because that did happen every once in a while. And yeah, I think for a lot of us, it kind of came down to just remembering where we were and what we were doing and practicing gratitude for it, because it would be easy, 700 performances in to sort of fall into complacency about it, because at the end of the day, it is a job just like any other job. But then the curtain goes down and you hear that really famous bum bum start at the beginning of every show. And if you just allowed yourself to sort of breathe into that and remember what you were doing, um, it was easy to feel grateful for it, and sort of like the theater goosebumpies all over if you just allowed yourself to kind of like be present with it. So that was the major challenge. And as far as touring is concerned, I actually really love touring. I think it's so fun because you're essentially getting paid to travel. And with that came sort of that freshness that you were talking about. We were in a new city with a completely new audience every week. And so remembering that too, I think was helpful as far as being on stage with each other, because just reminding yourself that there's always someone sitting out there in the audience who's experiencing Les Mis for the first time, and you get to be a part of that is pretty cool. And with a touring company, I think that happens more often than not. There are a lot of people who are introduced to the show for the first time when you're taking it across the country. So I loved touring. I thought it was so fun.
This is such a nerd part in me, but when you talked about the first bum bum, I was like, I was so gonna ask her about that because it was just in my mind talking about it. But there has to be that sense of rush and excitement when you hear
Mm-hmm.
the orchestra take over at the beginning. uh
Yeah.
what part of the show for you kind of is that time where, hey, I gotta focus now? Obviously you have your pre-show rituals you talked about, but there's
Mm-hmm.
obviously a time where, hey, I got an outside life, away from Les Mis, that needs to get put on pause. what point of that on the show is that for you?
Yeah, I was just talking with a friend about this the other night, actually, that I'm sure that dramatic actors of all kinds struggle with this sort of thing because, in many ways, playing the role of Fantine was really therapeutic. I had lots of opportunity to just really feel into my emotional self 8 times a week. And for the most part, it was really lovely to be able to access that part of myself. But, we're all human and we all go through um, trials, if you will. And I did, and I'm sure that many other people in this particular show with me experienced this same thing, that if something wasn't good outside of the work, in my personal life or with friends or family members, it got really hard then to go on stage and sing about loss and tragedy and trauma. And but it's part of the work. It's kind of part of what we do and why we choose to do it, because they're such human emotions and everyone experiences them. um, so I don't know, I really feel for all people who've performed any kind of tragic role like Fantine is, because sometimes it's really impossible to sort of separate what you're feeling as Mary Kate off stage versus what I'm supposed to be experiencing as Fantine on stage. Yeah, but I would say that the portions of my track that I really had to be present for were right at the beginning in the factory, partially because Fontine's kind of shot out of a cannon. There's no real lead up to the high intensity emotional experience. I mean, I Dreamed a Dream is the fourth song of the show. So it's a little unfair in that way, but I really needed to be present in the factory scene to experience what was happening to her there, because it's really the only setup that I have to launch into like the big number. And also just because it's very wordy, that particular part of the show, there's a lot of lyrics crammed into, 2 bars of music. So I needed to be aware of what I was doing, not only for the emotional content of what my character was supposed to be experiencing, but then also just so that I didn't trip over the words that I was supposed to be singing. Yeah, so that was it. But then really once I hit Dream to Dream, then it's sort of, that's a good launching point for the rest of the character's life, which isn't too long. Really.
Yeah, I mean, you right there, you talked about like the mechanical stuff about like how you as an actress get that ready. Before we talk about, obviously playing the part and really dissecting, not like dissecting, but knowing how she operates and obviously taking your tales from rehearsals and the audition process to the stage. But walk me through the casting process. I'm certain there was probably a lot of calls, a lot of waiting, and a lot of anticipations. But walk me through the audition process.
Yeah. Well, I know for a fact that it was different for every single one of us. We all have our Les Mis audition story. Mine is that I originally auditioned for the show when I was still on the Into the Woods tour. And at that particular time, we were in San Francisco with the tour. We were going to be there for several weeks. And so I got my initial audition appointment and then also did the callback in one calendar week. So I flew back and forth from San Francisco to New York twice, in like 9 days, which was really, really exhausting. And because of that, it didn't go very well because I was like jet lagged and tired and having to also work full time in between the auditions that I had, that I did not get cast originally. I didn't book the job, and I was very disappointed because obviously everybody wants to do Les Mis. Um, at that time I was auditioning just for female ensemble and Fantine understudy. So cut to a couple of months later and Into the Woods is finished. We've closed that tour and I'm back in New York. And I randomly, I mean, it was like 7 o'clock on a Friday night. So casting offices were just about to close. I got an email from my agent that was like, hey, Les Mis needs like an immediate final call back from you, something happened with casting and they want to see you again. So I had, 2 days to look over the material again. And this time they had added the Factory Girl track onto what I was originally auditioning for. So I went in on a Monday and did my final audition, and then found out like 2 days later that I had booked it, and I was in rehearsal for it less than a week after that. So I was kind of kicking myself thinking like you kind of wasted a lot of energy being really disappointed that this wasn't going to work out, and that was just you like not trusting the timing of things and how, everything happens for a reason. If you're meant to be somewhere doing something, then you will be. And so at that time I just was so grateful to be involved at all. And I got to understudy Fantine, which was great. I went on a couple of times for her in the first 6 months of being on tour, and my associate director and the resident director really liked what they saw when I was on stage. So 6 months into the tour, when Melissa Mitchell, the original Fantine, decided that she didn't want to stay and renew her contract, I got to audition again. So I filmed a tape while I was on the road, it was nice because I had a kind of a built-in creative team to help me with that. The resident director was there, the music director played for me. Me and a small group of other women that were in the cast got to audition for the role, and then found out that they wanted to see me again. So they flew me to New York from the tour, and then I came back. And then once I made it back to the tour after being in New York to audition in person, they wanted another tape from me. And only after that did I find out that I was essentially getting a promotion and was going to be bumped up to playing the role full time. So in total, I think I auditioned 7 times for the show, when everything is said and done, over the course of a year and a half, starting in the ensemble and then ending up with a principal role, which was like a total dream come true. So everything happens for a reason, Logan.
I think that's a great way of putting it. But
Yeah.
well, obviously there's got to be some difference, being in the ensemble and, covering a principal
Mhm.
as to actually having, the part to yourself.
Yeah.
What differences, were there?
I think the main one is that when you are an understudy or a standby for something, you are, every time you go on for the role, it feels like opening night. Like the adrenaline and the excitement, um, and it's a success of a show if you sang all the right words and hit all the right marks, and the show didn't go up in flames. Like you can walk away knowing that there was a job well done if that was the case. Whereas the sort of the luxury of being able to do it so often is that I was actually able to create a relationship with the role that I wouldn't have been able to do just going on maybe once every couple of months. So I think that's just the major difference, is that you just have more time to really get into the nitty gritty of the character and make adjustments and try things differently. And by the time you've made it a couple of months into a principal contract, you know the role so well that there's room for flexibility and for trying things differently. And so I think that's the main difference that I see. I think it would be wrong to say that there's more responsibility or something when you're playing a principal role versus playing an ensemble role, because I might have had more solo lines than some of the people in the ensemble, but the ensemble of Les Mis works harder than really anyone on stage. They literally never leave the stage. And if they do, it's for a minute and a half to do a quick change and then come back out. So um, I was really, really grateful, honestly, that I had both experiences, because I got to be the ensemble, because they operate that way. They're a very tight knit family, even though it's a large group of people. Everybody kind of works as a team, and the show feels like a group effort. And I am very happy that the way that I began my Les Mis experience was in that kind of environment, because I don't think some of the principals got that experience since they weren't in the ensemble. They all of the principals had lots of time off stage. Every single one of us, with the exception of the actor who was playing Jean Valjean, he was obviously very active through the show, but all the rest of us would have, 30 to 40-minute periods of time where we're just sitting in the dressing room waiting for our next cue. So the sense of camaraderie and sort of familial relationship that exists in the ensemble, I'm really grateful that I got to be a part of that. So, yeah.
I didn't realize that I saw the show in May of 2019 when it came to the Pantages. I
Oh,
didn't
cool.
realize you guys were, 2.5 years into the tour,
Yeah.
which was insane. And to think that, it was that good after that long period of time, super fun to watch. It feels like forever ago, like saying
Oh
congrats,
my
but
God.
obviously I can still say that because, you put a lot of heart and soul into the show. But
I'll take it. Thank you. Thanks for coming to see us.
but with that being said, now actually the character,
Mhm.
like I said before, you have obviously you have a life like we all do, and then you put it aside for the show, and then after the show's over, you got to bring your normal life back. I talked to a couple performers who said that sometimes it would be hard carrying, like, getting rid of the show energy to your normal life because the show stuff is just so heavy. Did that
Mm.
ever happen to you, or was it pretty easy to hop back on to, the Mary Kate regular life?
I think that for for kind of the difficult actor flaws of Fantine, like I was talking earlier about how um, it's just felt so abrupt to be thrown into the show and to just immediately be functioning at like a level 7 on the emotion scale. I think that was actually what was most difficult. For me, it was the opposite because there was no warm up into the character's tragic existence. She's just kind of tragic from the second that she steps on the stage to the second that she dies. Spoiler. Um, Everyone knows. um, but that I think that was actually what was most difficult for me. I'm not a tragic person, thankfully. I have not experienced in my life what Fantine experiences in hers. So I really would have to make like a concerted effort to get myself in just a focused place. I wasn't necessarily trying to like dredge up really depressed emotions every night before the show started, but I just really needed to be focused on what I was doing. Otherwise, I would kind of miss the boat and the emotion train would pass. And then I'd be trying to like swim to catch it basically for the entirety of the 40 minutes that I was on stage doing the role. But then I also, die within the first 45 minutes of the show. And the way that they've written the Fantine track, at least how it was with our show, is that I got to be a member of the ensemble for the barricade. And so it was kind of like I had a come down period where I could like cool off from what I had just done and relax in my dressing room and like eat my dinner and hang out and then put on my brown ensemble wig and my little like librarian outfit and go out and do the barricade. So I think for me, the transition back into just non-Fantine was okay. So yeah, I experienced it the other way around from other Les Misers before, and I'm not sure if that's just unique to me or if other Fantines have experienced that and struggled with that in the past. But yeah.
I don't know why. Obviously, performers love to be on the stage, but there's just something about hanging in your dressing room and just eating a random plate of Chipotle
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever it may be.
Uh huh. That was when I got to really kind of put my feet up and just relax after like running full throttle for a while. That's kind of what it felt like. It was like Jean Valjean's a marathon from the beginning of the show to the end, whereas Fantine is like sprints.
Is there since we're on the topic of food, was there a diet for the voice and for uh you know your weekly
Well,
endeavors?
yeah, I mean, there are certainly things that all singers try to avoid. I could never, I would drink my coffee in the morning, but then I'd have to give myself a nice long period of time after drinking coffee before I sang again, just phlegm and acid wise. I tried to avoid tomatoey things and things with almonds in them and stuff like that. I am vegan. So for the most part, I was just eating a lot of vegetables and quinoa and that kind of stuff. But everyone who's a singer, at least, who pays attention to that sort of thing, has a trigger food, dairy. Yikes. Big no before you go sing a big show. So
No
yeah.
eggs.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one too.
That's the no
Totally.
that's the
A
no
couple
no.
weeks ago, like, had avocado toast, and avocado does it to me too. And then I had a voice
Ah.
lesson right after I ate that, and I was like, man, shouldn't eat an avocado.
Well, I have to. Are you originally like from the Midwest, or did you like move there recently?
I was born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where I am now. I've been here with my parents and my sister since the end of November. I came back for the holidays and then gonna go back to New York in March.
So how does this is a person who's lived in the city in this city his whole life? How does one who like lives in Nebraska and Kansas? Obviously, you said you went to Oklahoma City College, so you
Hmm.
studied theater there. I
Yeah.
assume that played a big part of your passion for theater. But where did that spark for not only just liking theater come from, but also saying, "Hey, I want to do this"? Maybe.
Uh, you know, I think I remember like one sort of defining moment where I was in junior high, I think. I was sort of a late bloomer. I was not one of those theater kids who participated in lots of community theater and stuff growing up. I wasn't in a musical until I was in high school. But in junior high, I remember almost kind of discovering what a musical was with some of my friends, because the high school that I was planning to go to did a music theater summer camp, like a week long camp where you would end up putting on like a small musical. And I just remember feeling really fired up about that. Like, I can't believe that's a thing. So like I get to act and sing at the same time. So I did that camp, and I remember just being amazed that it existed and that I hadn't known that it had existed for the majority of my young life. So I think it was in that moment. And then I continued to do high school musicals and things for the next 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it was that. But it definitely, I remember going and seeing musicals and stuff when I was younger with my grandpa would get a yearly subscription to our performing arts center here in Lincoln. It's called the Lead Center. So I definitely did go and see some musicals, but it just never occurred to me that it was something that I could do for a career. I'm not sure why. It wasn't until I made it to high school where I thought, oh, like, this is something that people go to school for and graduate and pursue, rather than working in an office or whatever it is that you might be interested in doing. So I think it was that, but it was super, I mean, kind of like oh, yeah, I could do that, as opposed to being the kid who was listening to Wicked at like a super young age. I definitely had my Wicked obsession phase, but it wasn't until I made it to high school, really.
As one does with the Wicked, but
Everybody does.
but I think that's what's so awesome about national tours and people don't really, pay attention to, at least non-theater people, that these productions and these tours and like Les Mis, and they go to these communities and these small towns that this is their only source of the theater that comes in,
Yeah.
which is super awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it really hits harder, especially because this is a weird one. My mom is from Sacramento, and so
Okay.
that's kind of the closest small town you'll get in California.
Yeah, I'll take it.
So every time that theater would come in there, it would be like the president's coming or something like
Yeah,
something cool. You know what I
everybody
mean?
gets tickets. Yeah, totally. And I loved that too. I remember when I would go to shows with my grandpa, we would make a thing out of it. We would get like really dressed up and make sure that we go get dinner beforehand and get there nice and early so we can get to our seats. It always felt um, like a very special thing to be doing, which was cool. And I think you're right. Not much happens in Lincoln, Nebraska. So when if the touring companies come through, we get excited about it. But yeah, Les was supposed to come to Lincoln, actually. They had dates in 2020 at the Lead
Aw.
Center here. So who knows? if and when that will happen in the future. But yeah.
It's the sushi for us. We always got sushi, and ironically, on Hollywood Boulevard, they closed the sushi place we went to,
Oh,
and the waitress who always helped us, she got transferred to the one that's kind of more near our house, and we're like, oh my gosh, you're here
hey.
now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's destiny. But
Well,
uh,
that's good.
with that being said, some cities, there had to have been some cities where I don't know how the sightseeing went with the schedule, but I assume you guys probably had Mondays off every like consistently. Uh,
Yeah.
unless you're doing, short visits. But what were some cities that stuck out with you, scenery wise, but also there had to have been some theaters that you like specifically.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, I think the cities that I liked the most were the ones that sort of snuck up on me and surprised me. I think that was kind of the cool thing about being with the show for so long, that we started making it to lower market cities, which tend to be places that you don't put on your list of cities to go to for vacation. So we ended up in places like Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Greenville, South Carolina, and Spokane, Washington, and cities that I didn't really even know existed until I got there and was completely blown away by how cool they are. And every city has something to offer. So I think it was kind of those like sneaky, awesome ones that I didn't have any expectations of at all, that exceeded expectations once we got there. So I think like Spokane was one of those, just like absolutely gorgeous up in the Pacific Northwest. Greenville, South Carolina is just so charming and surprisingly liberal and very artsy, and has like a really cool downtown, and the theater was brand new and really stunning. And um, yeah, so it was kind of, I think it was more smaller towns that had just a lot of charm to them that I really loved. I think my favorite city overall was Vancouver up in Canada. We went up to Canada a couple of times, and Vancouver was, I thought, kind of the perfect mixture of an urban city with outdoor experiences, because it was so close to like big forests and mountains and a huge lake, but then it was also very did feel really urban. And I do like a mixture of those two things. I think that's my Midwestern roots sort of meeting with being a New Yorker for the last 7 years. So I think that was my favorite city. But as far as theaters are concerned, I think you always kind of have to give it to the Fox theater groups. There are a few of those. There's one in St.
Absolutely.
Louis and one in Atlanta. Those monstrosity, I mean, they look like a work of art on the outside and the inside. So I think those ones were my favorite. And then also the Opera House in Philadelphia, I think is gorgeous. Some, yeah, we got to play some really amazing like old theaters where you could just feel the history and sort of really have a deep appreciation for the number of people who had come through that theater over, decades to do different shows. We always had fun, especially in those older theaters. Like I think the Fox in St. Louis was one of them, where there were a lot of wall tags from lots of different shows. So it was fun to go through and see, shows from 40 years ago with names that we recognized, and cool.
The Fabulous Fox, I believe, is, I think
Yeah.
one of them are called that, but that seems to be the pretty consistent answer. I gotta whenever I travel, I always bully my family to go see the local, theater, but I'm
Theater.
outnumbered. I got a big family, so I'm like, all right, fine. Because last time we were in Boston, and I wanted to go to the Boston Opera House. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to see a show, but it's my goal to go see one, go just travel those theaters, and uh, really happy you enjoyed them, and while it lasted,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess hopefully
Well, you
hopefully
just got to
there's
get on the press team for some of these tours, and then you can have an excuse to go and visit them wherever they are and see the theaters, and
that's
that's a good way to do it.
that's the goal once stuff comes back to normal, hopefully.
Awesome, awesome. I
But
hope it works out for you. Sure.
I appreciate that. But with that being said, obviously, before we wrap up, just some advice you can give to perform for English and speaking is hard, to performers that they're they've been in this thing for 10 months now, And,
Yeah.
there's obviously schools that are doing stuff, but schools like me were doing, like, we did a Shakespeare show over Zoom, and I wanted to, just not wake up because it was just miserable. But what's some advice you can give to young performers, and also just some stuff that you've been doing to keep yourself in shape while, we wait for
Yeah.
good?
Well, I to keep myself in shape, I've kind of actually been cutting myself some slack, which hasn't happened for kind of a long time, really. I'm a perfectionist by nature, Logan. So I tend to over push myself, and I wanted to recognize this time as an opportunity for me to relate to my art differently, and to remember that as long as I'm still enjoying it, I think that's been the key for me is like I practice and sing and take acting classes because I like to do them now and not because I'm feeling frantic about keeping up. And I think that was kind of the motivation before. So, sort of falling back in love, I think, with why I like to do it in the first place, just for the joy of it, as opposed to for the work of it. So I feel like that's what I would recommend people try to do right now is like remind themselves of all of the things that they're passionate about, and um, just know that it will come back. It will come back, and we will be better for it. I think we'll be more grateful, and we won't take things for granted. Um, Yeah, which I think plays into. I mean, I think that my experience with my audition for Les Mis will stick with me for the rest of my career because I truly learned that timing is everything and that we don't have any idea what's coming for us. So it doesn't do any good to sit in comparison to others or to beat yourself up about things that you think you did poorly or wrong, or to focus on weaknesses, and instead to just continue to do it because you love it, and know that if you believe in yourself enough and if you put in concerted effort towards maintaining a peaceful, joyful relationship with yourself as an artist, then things will come for you because that's that's how it works. The most joyful performers and the ones who are easiest with themselves are the ones that we love to watch the most. So that's my advice.